Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first of 10 talks about the Kahn family. 10 talks. Each one, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending. And it's a story, of course, of an eminent family, since it's ours. But it is also a story which, in a sense, has a bearing on the Jews in Germany. Because when the story begins, at the beginning of the 19th century, our ancestors, the old Kahns, were country Jews who spoke Yiddish, who had no rights, no civil rights. They were an underclass. And they were under the protection of the local prince, the local sovereign, and who could decide on what terms they could live in his territory. And the terms were usually a tribute of so much money, a form of taxation. Now, the Kahns, they come from Baden. They were country Jews in Baden, B-A-D-E-N, which is in southwestern Germany, not far from the Rhine. It is important. The Rhine is very important because the Jews came up at the end of the Roman Empire. They came up to the Rhine, along the Rhine. The areas, the cities, the areas on the shores of the Rhine, where in those cities, in those areas, there was a relatively high percentage of Jews, and we know something about this because of the cemeteries. So in Baden, in the area where the old Kahns come from, there are old cemeteries, and they are with the lettering in Hebrew, which I can't read, but experts can, and you know that there were Jews there in the 14th century, 15th century. There were Jews there who lived there in the country. In the cities, the Jews in the big cities lived in ghettos, not in all big cities in Europe. And the ghettos were usually a kind of a street, the Jew street, and that was regulated by the local prince or the government. And there was usually a curfew. The Jews were not allowed out of the Jew street in the evenings. By 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, the gates were closed. And what did the old Kahns and the old Jews in Germany live on? Because they had no rights, and they could not own land. And they lived on trade and money lending. Money lending, a very important Jewish occupation. And they lived on trade, and if they lived in the country, they were cattle dealers or animal dealers, anything to do with animals. It's important for the Kahns because I don't want to anticipate this. There were the old Kahns, and one doesn't know anything about before the 18th century, one doesn't know anything about them. Now, it so happens that I was curious about it, and on a trip, Madeline, my younger daughter, and I were there. We're in the village from which the Kahns come, Steppach, S-T-E-B-B-A-C-H, Steppach, which is in southwest Germany, not far from Heilbronn. You can see it on the map. And that village today exists, and it's probably not much larger than it was 200 years ago. It's very small, And it's very small today. It doesn't have its own municipality. It's governed from the village next door. And we were there, and we tried to find the house, and we didn't know, which I know now, that in 1961, there was a urban renewal, village renewal, and all the old houses, including the old Kahn house, torn down. But the new houses look like the old houses, so you never know which is which. But it was exciting for us to have a feel of a small village in Germany, which is probably very much the same as it was then. And then we looked for the Jewish cemetery. That's always a big thing. Because the Jewish cemeteries in Germany and in Europe were always out of town, usually out of the little. And the Jews who lived in Steppe were buried in Eppingen, which is next door, which was slightly larger. And I went there, and we were too late. And it's always very difficult to get in anywhere. You have to get the key from there, and we couldn't get in. But I did have, and I do have, a little booklet on the cemetery with the pictures and a list of old gravestones with Hebrew lettering. And one of them is of Sarah Kahn. But if you look hard, the inscription is really Sarah, the wife of Pinchas Katz. And I had to rely on experts to tell me that Pinchas Katz is a transcript of Benedict Kahn. Benedict doesn't sound very Hebrew to me, but that's what's the husband. And they were the parents. Benedict and Sarah were the parents of Michael Benedict Kahn. Michael Kahn, our great ancestor, and his eminent wife, to whom I will dedicate, it's not the wrong word, then the second talk, that's talk number 2. So I won't talk about the eminent lady, Michael's wife, so I'll keep you on suspense. But Michael Kahn, well, you'll all be proud to know that Michael, our ancestor, was to have become a rabbi. And I think the only rabbi in our family, but he never made it. He didn't become a rabbi. I know nothing about him, but I have a picture of him. There was Michael Kahn in Steppach, and he was interesting for reasons which I will explain in a second, but not perhaps as interesting as his father-in-law, Abraham Bear like bear, B-A-E-R, Abraham Bear. He had the tavern to the Red Lion. That was his father-in-law. The tavern was opposite the church on the village square. And he and from what I can gather, from the hundreds of people in Steppach I interviewed, that's a lie, were much revered. Everybody loved old Abraham Bear, who was a cattle dealer and made his fortune, I don't know what it was, a fortune, in supplying the farmers with cattle, dealing with cattle. But he did very well, and I think he is much remembered more as the tavern, the Red Lion. The Red Lion, the Löwenwirt, the lion host, Wirt means host, of Steppach. And I'm very proud of him, because he seems to have been a very nice man. And he lived very long. He died, I think, in 1863 or something. He became quite old, 83 when he died. And he was the father-in-law of Michael Kahn. And now, father-in-law, that means his wife, subject of talk number 2, Franziska, was 16 when she married him. and that was in 1826. 1826. 1826. Great-great-grandmother Francisca was 16. She was born in 1810. She was 16 when she married Michael, who was 20 years older. And I don't want to talk about her now because it's next week. Next time I'll talk about her. But Michael clearly was a man of ideas. And it is to him that we owe the prosperity of the subsequent Kahns and his own, because 20 years after he married his wife Francisca in 1810, he was the richest Jew in Stebbach. And it was because he discovered the goose that laid the golden egg. He discovered that he could make a good living, a fortune, by selling bed feathers. Bed feathers. This was in in the 1820s or so. And it was a time, until then, only the nobility slept comfortably in beds, soft beds, with pillows and duvets, covers that were filled with whatever feathers, until the Kahns, until our ancestor Michael Kahn discovered that he could supply ordinary people with feathers at a reasonable cost so that they could sleep comfortably just like the rich. Our ancestor Michael Kahn democratized sleep. He is the father of comfortable sleep. We all sleep better because of Michael Kahn. Because, well, I don't know. Well, most of our pillows are filled with something. But he gathered the feathers from the neighboring geese, the golden geese that flew his way, and very soon after he did this, and he exhausted all his possibilities as a gatherer of bed feathers, goose feathers, he discovered that the geese in Hungary, not so far away, were even better feathered than the local Baden geese. And so he managed to import geese from Hungary. And so by the time he left Stebbach in 1854, thanks to the bed feathers, he was the richest Jew in Stebbach. And he had, and of course at first it was a problem of space, storage and space. And so he bought the house next door. That is documented. There are documents about the bill of sale. And anyhow, he aggrandized himself, and so he had a little factory, a bed feather factory in storage. And so I think that we should all be very proud of the genius which Michael Benedict Kahn had, that he had that bright idea. And the important thing is this was in line with the permissible Jewish trade, animal trade. Jews, cattle, of course, apart from money lending, we'll come to that later, but leather, for example, and other animal products were very largely in the hands of Jews, because Jews were not allowed to do anything other than trade. And if they were in the country, naturally they traded with animal products, such as bed feathers. And the goose that laid the Kahn's golden eggs, many of them, were bed feathers. So let us praise Michael Kahn.